California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Howser. Get ready for an adventure because we're going to be spending the whole day exploring, climbing on, and getting up close and personal with an honest-to-goodness California icon. And there it is, right up there, the world-famous Hollywood sign. Lots of history there and lots of colorful stories connected with that sign over the years. We're excited, and the fact that this morning the sign is kind of cloaked in fog and mist, it's kind of overcast, it just adds that much more mystique to what this adventure is all about. An adventure spent on the Hollywood sign, which of course is a fine example of California's gold.
Just getting to the Hollywood sign was exciting as we traveled up into the Hollywood Hills on a narrow road with lots of twists and turns. But finally, we made it to the top.
Our adventure begins. We're on top of the world. Actually, we're on top of Mount Lee. And Chris, what we're looking at right here behind us, this big tower, this has a rich history to it as well, doesn't it?
Well, all the antennas that you see currently serve all of Los Angeles for emergency services. And in the old days, way back in the 20s and 30s, that was Los Angeles's first television station.
So this is a very historic set of towers up here. There's also something up here on top of this mountain that we can't see that's very important as well.
Well, buried inside the hill, just like a World War II bunker, are all the emergency services devices that are currently used for Los Angeles, for the Highway Patrol, the police, and the fire department.
So there's a lot going on up here on top of Mount Lee.
And it's very busy inside the hill.
We can't see that, but we can see this. This is what we have come up here to see. And Chris, let's try to get down here. I don't want to fall off right at the beginning of our adventure, but this is a view of the Hollywood sign that I have never seen before. It's very interesting looking at it, looking down at it from the back.
This is actually my favorite shot because it looks out over the top of the sign that represents all of Hollywood and the Los Angeles way of life.
Well, it's kind of hard looking out there today. LA is off in the distance in the overcast, but boy, right here behind the sign, this really makes a statement, and people at home can go on the webcam and see this exact shot live right now.
24 hours a day, live shot. That's why we have two webcams, Huell, and one is this shot right here with a thermometer, by the way, on it, so you know exactly what temperature it is where we're standing.
And this can be accessed by people all over the world who want to tap into the Hollywood sign.
It is the World Wide Web, hollywoodsign.org.
All right. Now, when this sign first went up, there were no .orgs around, and it wasn't the Hollywood sign. Let's kind of review the history before we go on with our adventure.
Well, when the sign was first put up, it was a real estate billboard. And when I say billboard, I mean Las Vegas style. It was surrounded with 4,000 20-watt light bulbs. And there was a little gentleman that was responsible for keeping all those light bulbs lit.
And the sign read
Hollywood Land.
Now, that was the name of this development right out here.
They were selling houses with this sign. It wasn't until 1949 that this sign actually represented the film industry.
All right, now how did that evolve? It started in 1929 as a billboard to advertise houses, Hollywood Land. How long was Hollywood Land up as a sign?
Well, it was supposed to only last for a year and a half. And then it just stayed and fell into disrepair. And by the time you got to the mid-40s, the neighbors were saying, would you please take that trash down off the hill? And just when it was about to all go away, the city of Los Angeles and the Chamber of Commerce said, wait a minute, let's put a sign up here that says Hollywood, signifies the importance of the film industry to the way of life here in Los Angeles, especially considering that television was growing and there was concern about jobs here for the people involved in the film industry.
Now, do you think that decision was actually a conscious decision, or was it something, a light bulb that just went off in somebody's mind? Hey, if you take land off of it, it says Hollywood.
Well, the community and the industry has always been known as Hollywood, so it made sense at the time, and especially the Chamber of Commerce wanted to promote Hollywood, the town where all the films were being produced.
Okay, so 1949, the L-A-N-D came off.
Right, and it went away. The sign then, the original sign, was actually about 5 feet taller than this sign. But the sign then was made out of telephone poles and tin, along with the light bulbs.
Really? So it was not really made to last.
No, and when we get down there, we'll look at how strong the sign is now, and that's why it hasn't been falling into disrepair like the previous signs were.
All right, now, did they build a new sign in 1949 that said Hollywood?
That was a rehabilitation of the 1923 sign. Part of the problem from 1923 all the way to 78 with why they were constantly giving this sign facelifts, more than Phyllis Diller ever had, was because the sign was not built to last. And it wasn't sunk into the ground with caissons.
It was always kind of temporary.
It was always temporary with tin and phone poles. In fact, one time somebody lit one of the telephone poles on fire.
Now, did you say 1923 or 1929?
1923 was the first sign.
1923, and you can still see, boy, the view up here, look, that's Lake Hollywood. That's the Hollywood Reservoir right over there.
That's Lake Hollywood, a great place to run or walk your dog.
And are all these houses in front of us, is that the original Hollywood land?
That is the Hollywood land community right there. And
is
that's
it
what they were
still
trying
known
to
as
sell.
Hollywood land? No.
It's still known as the Hollywood Land Community, and it's the Hollywood Land Homeowners Association. And those were the houses and the pieces of land they were trying to sell.
So if it hadn't been for this housing development and the guys who wanted to promote the sales of houses in this development, there probably never would have been a Hollywood sign here today.
You're probably right.
Yeah, it was all instigated by that advertisement, 1923, that read Hollywood Land.
Good fortune out of something that started out just as a billboard.
All right, this is exciting. Enough of this history. We're getting ready to travel right down here and get up close and personal with the world-famous Hollywood sign. I'm not sure how we're going to get down there, but we're going to do it. Now, this is exciting. We have now been joined by Linda, who represents officially the
City of Los Angeles.
The City of Los Angeles. And now this is unexpected, Chris. What are we getting ready to do right now?
Well, we're going to go right down this little drainage path here and get ourselves down to the sign. But this is why it's so dangerous to come up on this hillside.
We're going down. Look at this. Look where we're going. We're going down holding on to a rope.
It's part of the adventure. You said it was an adventure.
Well,
here we go.
I thought there would be a stairway or something.
That's, as Chris said, this is one of the reasons why we say it's dangerous to get up here. It's better to view it from down below in Hollywood.
Yeah, this is hardcore.
The good news is on a foggy day, there's no rattlesnakes up here. Usually when it's a hot summer day, there's a problem.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, now, Linda, ladies first. Also, you can kind of, let's see how she does it. Oh, you know what you're doing. You've done this before.
Just a few times.
All right, I'll go next. And then we just, oh boy, this is where it gets kind of, oh my gosh, be careful.
Nope, I got it.
Oh.
Resilient city.
Do we have insurance? Look at this. Oh, whoa. This is where it gets.
Yeah, right there is where it's really pretty.
Whoa. Whoa! We'll cut that part out. Come on, Chris.
Okay, so there's another going to be a little bit of a steeper one again here.
Boy, this is an adventure just getting down the hill.
usually, if you do it a few times, you get used to it and you can bounce right down. But first time, I understand.
We made it. We're at the bottom of the hill. We are at the sign. Actually, we're at the H on the sign. And boy, when you get up close to it, you really begin to understand just how big these letters are. Have the letters always been the same size?
Now, the original sign was 50 feet tall. The sign you see today from 1978, these letters are 45 feet tall.
So it's not quite as tall.
5 feet shorter.
Don't fall off there, Linda. Now, who's in charge of taking care of this sign? Because it looks like it's in good shape to me.
The Hollywood sign, the care of the Hollywood sign is done by the Hollywood Sign Trust, which Linda and I are chair and vice chair of. And it's our job with 7 other people to make sure that all of the immediate environs surrounding the sign, its security, the website, are all done properly.
All right, so we're now going to enter into this hallowed ground of the Hollywood sign.
Yep.
And this is a place lots of people want to come, very few people can come.
Well, I've been down here with city council people, mayors, and press from around the world, but the public is not allowed up here. It's really too bad because, you know, you can walk across the Golden Gate Bridge and you can go up the top of the Empire State Building, but you can't go to the Hollywood sign for 3 reasons. One is we're in a fire district, and that's the dominant reason why they don't want people up here, because it's so dangerous. And you can see this brush. If you dropped a cigarette, the whole hillside could go up.
I also think liability coming down that hill.
Well, or just people get injured trying to hike
Sure.
and come down that hill.
Absolutely. And the third reason?
The third reason is the sign itself. We're trying to keep the sign shining bright and looking white like it does all the time, because it is the symbol of Hollywood and the entertainment industry.
All right, let's walk on down here. Now, boy, this goes right up to the edge. We got to be careful here or we'll end up down in Hollywood land, the subdivision down there. Boy, there's nothing easy about coming up here. Be careful, Cameron, you're going to slip right here. I don't want to lose the camera or the cameraman. Oh, wow. Look at this. Standing right here looking up at the O. I feel like a mountain goat out here, but now it just gets better because look where we are right now. And Chris, this is a famous spot. We're doing an interview where you're used to doing interviews.
We've done an awful lot of interviews up here. Perhaps the most notable recently was with the mayor of Los Angeles, when we put the finishing touches on a new paint job on the sign.
Now, what do people come up here when you're doing interviews? These are probably with people from all over the world. What is the fascination people have with this sign?
Well, you know, it really is the connection with Hollywood. There's something about this symbol. It represents all the hopes and dreams and the glamour and the money and the authority or power or whatever it is.
Getting deep around here with all that kind of talk, but I mean, yeah, it's probably true, isn't it?
That's why worldwide people connect Hollywood sign with that sense of Hollywood and its glamour.
But isn't it interesting? It's just corrugated
metal. However, this time around, it's corrugated metal with steel crossbars and steel going into the ground. The problem with the previous decades of the sign was it was just a telephone pole shallow in the dirt.
Yeah, because I would imagine up here, especially as high, there's the D down there. This is the L. When the wind starts blowing up here, I bet it gets hairy up here, doesn't it?
Which is exactly why the new construction that has been up here since 1978 is so important. One of the problems before is that metal sheets would fly off in that old telephone pole sheet metal construction.
You mean
it would get windy.
Sheets of metal would just fly off into the neighborhood down
Well,
here?
not in the neighborhood, but in the hillside area, that's for sure, when it got windy. And that's one of the reasons why it always looked deteriorated. And this new construction doesn't do that. This new construction is solid in the wind.
How often do you have to paint the sign?
We painted the sign in 1995, and then we painted it again, but it really needed it in 2005. So that's a 10-year span. It probably needs it more often. And the reason is this big old umbrella like structure here has taken all of the elements, the wind, the rain, the smog in LA, etc., and that all just wears on the side of the paint.
On a sunny day, the sun is just blasting right on it.
Right, and that's why we're constantly up here looking at it and checking on it. You know, when you're down in Hollywood and you look up, it looks fine, it looks white.
Yeah.
But when you get up close, and if it was your house,
well, it needs to be washed down a little bit. Do you come up and sponge it down?
No, just the rain does it.
Here's another L. Let's go down to the Y. And I never realized that the letters were offset. They're not in a straight line. Has that always been the way? Let's go down here so we can see how they're set back. Have they always been offset like this?
this staggered set is what makes it famous. That's what makes the image so licensable, because it's so distinct with 9 letters offset one to another.
And it was always that way?
It was always that way. Well, if you look at the hillside, imagine trying to build a perfectly symmetrical set of 9 letters.
It wasn't an artistic decision. It was a practical decision as to how the letters were going to be placed.
It's called dealing with what you got up on this hillside.
And it's this beautiful, you know, the Golden Gate Bridge, the name of the color is the Golden Gate color, orange. Has there ever been a debate about whether the Hollywood sign should be anything but white?
No, and as a matter of fact, there's always been a desire to have the most luminescent white paint as possible so that you get as much of a glowing effect. As you will easily note, the sign is not lit. But a lot of people don't even realize that, because especially on, at dusk, or if there's a full moon, the white paint of the sign glows and gives people the feel that it is lit.
Has there ever been a movement? I keep hearing movements every once in a while to light the sign. I was going to say relight it, because in its original days as Hollywoodland, it was lit.
It was lit with little light bulbs going up the side of it, and that was 1923 up until the 30s, and then it was turned off. It was never lit on a permanent basis after that. Have there been movements towards that? There's been lots of times when people during the 80s and 90s were promoting, why don't we light the sign, because people come to Hollywood and expect to see lights, camera, action, and the Hollywood sign at the middle of the night. The problem is you have an attractive nuisance here. And if you look at this neighborhood, very tiny streets, fire danger.
There are people who live down here.
And the last thing they want is a crowd up here coming to see the lit up Hollywood sign in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? That it's so popular and so many people want to see it that if, not controlled in some way, this hillside would be swarming with people all the time.
It would be, and I'm not sure that some people, it's a lot of fun to see it really up here and see the staggered letters, but the truth is the beauty of the sign is down below.
Yeah.
You don't see the corrugated letter, you don't see the little dirty white sign, you don't see the little paint flecks. What you see is this perfect white show of Hollywood.
See, it's just like Hollywood itself.
Yes, it is.
It's just like the movies themselves. You don't see the reality in movies. You just see the glitz and the glamour. You don't get up and see all the nips and all the tucks.
You've exactly got it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you stand back far enough, you don't see the warts, and that's the nature of the Hollywood sign. If you fly into Los Angeles, you see the sign. That's another reason it's white or not pink and not green.
Yeah.
Is because when you're coming into LAX, you can see it up here on the hillside.
I'm looking over your shoulder. What are these loudspeakers right here?
Good question. Very good question. This is part of the security system that keeps the sign safe.
Well, what do you mean? What's going to happen there?
The loudspeakers will allow the security monitors, the park rangers or the city police, to communicate if somebody gets up here. You in the blue shirt.
Communication go. Get the heck out of here.
You in the blue shirt with a microphone out of the Hollywood sign. It's a mountain fire district. Exactly like that.
And what are these little things right here?
That's another interesting.
Those are infrared lights, and so even at night, these cameras are working as if it was daylight out here. So the people manning the surveillance bank downtown underneath a city building see this whole hillside and would see anybody that came up this hill.
See, there's another similarity with Hollywood. There's more to the story than you see.
Absolutely.
There's more security here than at first it appears to be. You got this place wired.
Absolutely. We're trying to protect the sign and protect people too. Again, it's not a safe place to be. The best place is below.
If people get by the loudspeakers and the security cameras and they can get down the hillside to get here in the first place.
And the motion detectors and the infrared lights and.
You got rattlesnakes here.
And
so you got the whole thing covered.
Yes. Don't come. Look from the street.
Now here comes, is that a police helicopter?
Yes, that's a police helicopter, and that's part of the progression of events when somebody comes up to try to visit the sign. The people in surveillance see them on the cameras downtown, and then a police helicopter is dispatched.
So he really is here to check things out. We better wave. I don't want him thinking we're not supposed to be up here.
No, none of us.
Look at that. He came right up here next to the sign.
Yep, he's checking out to make sure that the people who are here are the people who are authorized to be here.
Wow.
And nobody else.
Wow. I'm looking over your shoulder. Let's walk down here. The helicopter's moving off. We looked friendly. Look how this, let's stop here, Chris, because this is kind of an example of how well this sign is placed in the ground. This is serious.
You've got deep caissons into the ground, and that's another reason why this sign has stayed upright.
Yeah.
You could hang a house off these caissons on this hillside.
Wow. And again, here's the D. Look at the D over here. Now they're ladders going up the back there. What are they for?
Well, you got the ladders going up the back of each letter because remember, we have to maintain the cameras. Those infrared lights have a life and eventually they burn out. We have to replace those. So we are constantly up and down all the letters. We're keeping up the electronics.
Well, there's also the sign itself and checking it out, doing sort of a check of the bolts and the nuts and making sure that with the wind shear. Exactly. So it's all about inspecting the sign, the physical sign itself, too.
Is there a Hollywood sign maintenance crew?
No, there's not. There is the Hollywood Sign Trust, and the Hollywood Sign Trust is the one that's out there funding the security system. They're funding companies to come in and do annual inspections, painting, that kind of stuff.
Because it's got to be kind of exciting to maintain the Hollywood sign. If you were a worker, to go home and tell all your neighbors and family and friends, I painted the Hollywood sign today.
And the guys that come up and do the quarterly touch-up on the painting, they're always up here with cameras, and they're doing exactly what you're talking about, a picture with Hi Mom up at the Hollywood sign.
Now, I would have walked right past these. In fact, I did, but Linda stopped us and said, look, a piece of Hollywood history here.
Yeah, this is a little bit of Hollywood archaeology, you could almost say. Part of the original Hollywood sign, some part of the footing system of the original Hollywood land sign.
Wait a minute. This goes back to 1923?
Probably either 23 or might have been part of the reconstruction in 1949.
Wow. And they just, when they took the old sign down, they left the footings here.
Well, as I think we've seen with the pathway and the difficulty maneuvering, it'd be hard to tear it out. It's hard to haul it away.
The original sign was made of wood?
Just like telephone pole pieces and tin, and with light sockets stuck in the middle of it.
Wow. Because this looks pretty stable right here. I mean, this looks like it was built to last.
Well, I think that they would have had footings in the sign, particularly when they rebuilt it in 1949 to try to last longer. So, they would have had footings, and then they built the actual structure itself out of telephone poles and, as Chris said, tin.
But remember, the sign was 5 feet taller, so taller, here comes the wind, there's the leverage, and down it comes.
I would think these could just snap right off.
And that's what was happening.
Like they did.
But it is interesting because in Hollywood, something that dates back to 1923 is ancient history.
Absolutely.
And this is still here. Look at this. It's exciting just to kind of be up this close to it and realize that this is where it all started.
In one sense, that's the beginning of the end for Hollywood land.
Yeah. The adventure continues right on the side of, boy, I am holding on right here, but we have found something else here embedded in the ground that looks suspiciously like part of the original sign.
Well, there's lots of parts and pieces that are still down here that weren't cleaned up when they restored the sign at various times along the decades. As you'll notice, though, this has the holes where the light sockets are.
Let's hold this up.
Actually, I think those holes are probably for wind shear. They would have put holes in the sign. I mean, there was one generation the sign had holes in the metal so that the wind would go through. Exactly.
What am I holding on to here that I assume is not going to break and I'm going to fall off the side of the mountain?
I hope you don't. Probably one of the cross beams. Some of the cross beam again. You know,
there's all kind of stuff down here.
Yep.
Well, they were trying to learn as they went along with the holes for the wind shear and the additional structures supporting the sign, but they never got it right until 1978.
Yeah. Look over here. Oh! Look at this. Another
Careful of the snakes when you pull that out.
piece of wood, some historic nails, and there's snakes over here.
Snakes would be resting underneath pieces like this. That's why I let you pull it up.
And here's barbed wire. This was the old security system.
This was our original high-tech security system, which was called a fence.
Now we've done it. We've climbed up into the L. We were going to go into the H for Huell, but it was too high up. There's no C for Chris, so we're in the L, which stands for Los Angeles, and for you, Linda.
absolutely.
All right, now, even though we're not in the H, Chris, there is an amazing and true story. It is not an urban myth. It's a true story about something that happened in the H, in the early days of this sign.
There's a lot of fact and fiction about this sign, but one thing that is fact is in 1932, a Broadway starlet came out to Los Angeles to find her fortune here in Hollywood in the movie business, and unfortunately her dreams did not come through, so she climbed up to the top of the H in 1932 and jumped off to her untimely death.
To the top of the H.
Yes, it was quite dramatic, as you might expect.
And this must have made quite an impression. This was front page news.
This was front page news. Her name was Peg Entwistle. She was a very pretty girl. It was a very, very sad story. Lots of myths grew up around that, too. The next day she would have made her big break. And it also started sort of some myths about other people. But Peg Entwistle, sad for her, but she is the only time that somebody committed suicide here at the sign.
Wow, and it's significant that she was an aspiring starlet.
Yes, of course, because this symbolizes people's dreams of making it in the business.
What does climbing up into the L signify? What are we trying for here? I think we were just doing this for effect, because I got to tell you, it is quite impressive sitting up here looking out with the wind blowing in our faces and the sense of being up on the sign itself. It has its own feel to it, doesn't it, Linda?
It does. And I love how you said L for Los Angeles, because we could see the whole city laid out here looking so beautiful. And the sign, you know, Hollywood, and the sign is Los Angeles.
And we are in and on
The Hollywood sign. I like the idea that Huell has Hollywood at his feet.
Sitting in the L. Well, we've come down off the L, and Linda is leaving us now. I guess there's nothing else to prove after we've climbed up in the L, is there, Linda?
That's kind of the pinnacle of excitement. And besides, the big city of Los Angeles needs me to get back to work.
You're going to work.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for joining us on this adventure.
Thank you.
We've made it so far without anybody slipping, falling, without any lawsuits, without any rattlesnakes.
Good, and keep it up.
It's been a good day. Thank you very much. We say goodbye to Linda, but we say hello to a fellow who represents another chapter in the history of the Hollywood sign. And this is exciting for you, Chris, because you've never met this guy.
You bet it is. And this is a gentleman in part responsible for the sign we see today.
Absolutely. So you're going to be listening, just like the rest of us, to this man's story. Mr. Peterson, you actually built or rebuilt this sign back in
1978, the summer of 1978.
All right, well, tell us about the story. How do you go about rebuilding the Hollywood sign?
Well, first of all, there was the old Hollywood sign here, and our company I work for, Pacific Outdoor Advertising, they got the bid to take down the sign and rebuild the new sign on the steel columns and sheet metal facing.
Now, when you came up here and looked at that old sign, It was pretty ratty, wasn't it? I've seen pictures of it. It's about to fall down.
Yes, it looked very dangerous.
And what did you think? You'd never done anything like this before.
Not exactly, no. Not in a terrain like this, no.
So
never.
how do you tackle a project like this? How do you plot it out?
Well, we had several meetings, of course, with the executives of Pacific Outdoor Advertising, and the first sign was built by John Roach, who was the uncle of Hell Brown Jr., who was the CEO of Pacific Outdoor Advertising. In fact, his grandmother started Pacific Outdoor Advertising. So anyhow, we got the bid. We bid through the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, and we came in low bidders, so we got the bid to take it down. Then we started the planning, and we got an engineer, C.A. Van Dam, and Andre Galley, who drew up all the blueprints and shop details and everything for the sign.
So this thing was well engineered from the very beginning. I guess it had to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. This sign that's here right now, yes, very true.
Now, I've seen pictures, actually some wonderful movies made of it coming down. It almost just fell down, didn't it?
Well, that's true. Of course, we had a crane up on the top of the hill, and we used kind of winched it off the crane, and we tied onto each letter before we cut them off and let them fall. So we didn't want them to fall forward down the hill. We wanted to fall back against the mountainside.
So the first thing you did was take down the old sign completely, the whole thing.
That is
correct. So the side of the mountain was actually, for a certain period of time, the side of this mountain was without a Hollywood sign.
You're absolutely correct. At one time, this hill was bare again for the first time in many, many years. In fact, about 55 years.
Now, how did you build the new sign?
Well, the men that worked on the sign, they were all excellent workers. And to dig the footings, we had to dig all the footings with jackhammers, air compressor and jackhammers. And this is footing on the second leg of the letter O. It was solid rock all the way down. We had to use a 90-pound jackhammer all the way.
Now, that was probably unexpected.
That's right. Now, the others were a little bit easier. However, we used a hydraulic jack made from an airplane landing to jack out the old telephone poles, because we had to take it out and use the same footings that was with the old telephone poles.
Now, is this sign exactly where the old sign was? Every single letter is exactly placed exactly where it had been before.
That is correct. Even the configuration of the letter W and so forth. It's a little odd shape and one thing or another, but we had to do this because when I took the plans to the Los Angeles Cultural Heritage Board, this was Cultural Heritage Monument number 111.
So it had to be exactly the same when it was replaced.
Exactly. Exactly right.
Now, I've seen, and it's a treasure trove. It is wonderful to see this old movie that was made of this whole process. Who made that movie? What was that all about?
There was a young lady up here going to college, and she was doing for a college project. Her name was Mary Huell, and she was up here nearly every day, but she was shooting this movie with a Super 8 projector. And I bought one of her films from her, and I transferred it over onto VH video. And I let you look at that one.
Yeah, but what was the deal? This was like a college project for her?
That is correct. That's what she was using it for.
And how did she get the aerial shots?
The vice president from Hughes Helicopter came up here while the other helicopter pilot, who was setting all the beams and so forth, and so he just kind of followed Greg Ash, who was setting the beams and so forth, with his helicopter, and he took this Mary up in his helicopter, and also his photographer too. They were taking pictures as it was being built.
The shots we have of the movies show these helicopters coming in with these big pieces of metal here, placing these things down in the ground.
That's right. And the engineer and the draftsman that drew up all the plans, he had to make sure that none of the segments of the beams were more than 1,400 pounds, because the helicopter could not lift more than 1,400 pounds at a time.
So there was a lot of commotion going on up here.
Yes. I had from 8 to 12 persons working up here at all times.
And how long did the project take to build this new sign?
Well, we started taking the old sign down August 8th, 1978, and we completed the entire project as you see it today on October the 30th, 1978, because we had a time limit, because they was having a big 75th anniversary up at Griffith Park, where they built a great big tent, and they was having this Hollywood Diamond Jubilee up at Griffith Park, where they put up a great big tent.
So you had to be on time.
Amen. And we come in under budget and a week ahead of time.
Now, wait a minute. That in itself is history right there. You were on time and under budget.
I'll tell you one thing. The president of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce at that time, Jack Foreman, he was very proud of all the work that was done up here, and he was very grateful for everything that was done here.
Now, this is a very obscure and interesting part of the history of the sign. What do we have right up and down here, Mr. Peterson?
This is a list of all the gentlemen that worked on the sign up here on the hill and also in our steel shop down at Pacific Outdoor Advertising.
Now, whose idea was it to put this is really nice to see the names up here.
It may have been this Bill Heller, because he was a welder that wanted to weld all these names on there, and he got permission from us to do it.
So these are the names of all the people who worked on the sign in 1978.
That is correct.
All of them.
Absolutely.
Except for one.
Except for one. And it was our engineer, C.A. Van Dam, and he came up here one day and he seen his name wasn't there, and that kind of upset him a little bit, which I don't blame him, because he stamped the engineered plans, and so I made up a special 1 foot square plaque and had his name welded on there and bolted it onto the back of the plan, and it's still right here.
Right here. This is the one you added. Right. His name again is
Cornelius A. Van Dam.
Now, when you stand here and look at all these names, you probably knew every one of these fellas, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. This Andrew Galley, who drew up the plans, he now is living in Texas. And some of these guys, this was my supervisor, Bill Corral.
See, this is a wonderful piece of history.
These are the guys that worked for us.
Wow. Where's your name?
Mine is right here.
Oh, right near the top.
Yeah. Bill Heller put his on top because he was doing the welding, you see.
Well, I tell you what, it's held up well. We're standing here looking at the H off in the background. We're hearing the motion detector go off in the background because they have a security system up here now.
Right,
so
that's
not
good.
Just anybody can walk up here. This is a special deal for all of us to be up here today.
Very true. Me too, actually, because I hadn't been up here for many, many years.
Now we're looking at some real Hollywood sign history. Mr. Peterson and his son Steve are each holding light bulbs, and these are the real bulbs that were in that original sign.
That is correct, and they quit lighting the sign in 1939, so evidently people came up here and threw the bulbs out. But while my crews were building the sign up here, they found some of these laying in the bushes.
You're kidding.
And
they've been laying in the bushes for 40 years.
And
right.
This one still works.
You're kidding.
Serious.
Be careful with that. That is worth its weight in gold. Yeah. Now, how do we know? Let me just play devil's advocate. How do we know that came from the Hollywood sign?
Well, we believe it to be very true, because the man that lived behind the letter L, he lived behind the letter L in a little shack for many years, and he kept changing the light bulbs as they burned out. And I suppose he may too have thrown the ones that weren't any good down. But when they quit lighting in 1939, the vandals come up here, they're graffiti experts and whatnot. They just took the bulbs out and see how far they could throw them, I suppose.
What do you mean, the man who lived behind the letter L? I've never heard that story before.
He lived in a little shack behind the letter L, and he just lived there, and his job was to change these light bulbs as they burned out.
Have you heard this story?
Yes, it's part of Hollywood legend. It is actually fact.
So there was a man who lived behind the letter L.
And managed the light bulbs.
Wow. So you're right.
And there was the way I heard the story too, there's 4,000 light bulbs around the perimeter of all these letters in Hollywood land. And another thing, when they first when these lights were burning, first the Hollywood would light up, and then it would blink, and then the land would light up. And then there was this kind of a spotlight in the middle which shined upon the sign also.
Hollywood land, Hollywood land, Hollywood land.
Remember, they're trying to create the Vegas effect, and flashing at you, buy homes, because it was a real estate billboard.
Now it gets very interesting because there's a very obscure part of the Hollywood sign story, and that's the part about the dot. What's the story about the dot?
Well, there was a big spotlight down here on the hill that used to flash also, and you can see it in a lot of the old pictures.
And it showed up as a white dot?
Well, it was a big spotlight that just was down on the side of the hill here.
Wow. You'd never heard of this.
I have not heard about this.
See, this is so much fun. There's so many layers to this story. Here's another layer right over here. Come on out here and explain to us. We haven't formally met. Your name is?
Mike Delahatton.
Okay, Mike, you're holding?
I'm holding one of the few pieces of the sign. I'm one of the lucky few that has one of the existing pieces.
Now, how did you get this?
I got this from a gentleman down the road. I live in Beechwood Canyon, and he had come up in '78 and got the piece from somewhere on the on the hill. And
it's right in. Oh,
yeah, it has all the sockets, you know.
Oh, wow. This is
kind of a familiar
the first
sight,
time that the bulb and the sign have been reconnected in a long time. Wow. Now, do you mind me asking how much you paid for this? Is that a personal question?
I'm not ashamed. I think it was like $40-50.
Uh-huh.
You know, I think most people looked at it like it was just a piece of junk, you know, but I looked at it and said, well, that's a piece of history up there, you know.
How do you have this displayed?
It just kind of leans against a wall. It's kind of a conversation piece, you know. People come in and go, what's that piece of junk in your house? And I say,
Part of the Hollywood sign.
And instantly everyone goes over and wants to touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this happened. Somebody actually bought the old Hollywood sign that you tore down in the 70s.
That is correct.
What happened? What was the deal?
Well, the name of the people who bought it is Bob Jones and Tony Woods, and they were going to make little dog tags out of it. It'd be stamped. They'd flatten out the metal and cut little pieces and stamp Hollywood into it.
How much did they pay for the old sign?
Well, what I heard was $10,000.
And did you did you clear all this material out?
I had a gentleman from our Pacific Outdoor haul it down there day after day, and finally the man, this Bob Jones, he says, please don't bring any more, because I say when they bought the sign, they bought everything, the telephone poles, the pipe girders, and everything else that went with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of material here. There are a lot of dog tags.
You got that right. He never used all the material for that.
But you've got a piece of the sign.
And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think it's a great piece.
Wow. Do you think there are a lot of pieces like this out there? There probably are.
I think, you know, I met these guys today, you know, and they had a piece, and, you know, if we're running into someone else that has a piece, and I think in the neighborhood there's generally probably a couple people that have been here since '78, and they probably felt bad that day and went up there and got a piece for themselves. So,
well, it is a piece of history.
That is true.
I mean, look at this. It's beautiful.
And even while we was taking down the sign and putting up the new one, there were people down in front of the Grumman Chinese Theater trying to sell little pieces of the metal from the old Hollywood sign. Yes, that's true.
That's part of Hollywood, too. Any way to make a buck.
Right, that's right.
Now, here's an interesting part of the reconstruction story of the Hollywood sign back in 1978. HOLLYWOOD. Each letter was underwritten by a different person. That's how they raised the money to redo the sign.
Well, the project is going to cost $278,000 to do. So Hugh Hefner offers up the Playboy Mansion to have a fundraiser. Now, 9 letters into $275,000, and you got to find a donor for $27,000 apiece
for each letter.
Right.
And here the story in the LA Times says that Gene Autry underwrote the L, Hugh Hefner underwrote the Y, Andy Williams underwrote the W, and Alice Cooper underwrote one of the O's.
In classic Hollywood ways, a very diverse group.
Wow, that's an interesting collection. And they didn't actually underwrite those letters necessarily.
Well, I can assure you that the W is associated with Andy Williams.
Part of the history, one of the chapters, the more colorful chapters of the history of the Hollywood sign over the years, has been the reconfiguration of the sign. in clandestine ways, particularly late at night. Usually this happens. Is that right, Chris?
In the 70s and 80s, we had quite a few pranks pulled on the Hollywood sign. Remember, we didn't have high-tech security in those days.
Yeah, the security was very lax, and here are two of the scoundrels right here. This is big news that you all have returned to the scene of the crime. They always do, you know. So let's introduce yourself to everybody and tell us your connection with the Hollywood sign.
My name's Raf Sanchez. I came from a band called the Raffies out of New Orleans. Back in '84, '85, we came out to California, and one of the first things we wanted to do was make a splash, and we wanted to come out and change the Hollywood sign.
Now, how did you decide to come up and change the Hollywood sign? I mean, you can make a splash without doing that.
We knew that it was the biggest billboard on planet Earth. So we figured, you were just young, scoundrels, that if we could put it together, we could get it changed.
And how did you accomplish this? This involved a lot, didn't it?
Well, we came out one day. We came out here. It was before there was as much security now, because it's pretty tough now. But we came out and with the band. There was 4 of us and some extra folks. We showed up and we started taking some measurements. But when we first
scouted it out.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You got to do that. We did that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was pretty overwhelmed by the scope of it, because from the distance it doesn't look like much, but when you actually get to these things, these puppies are huge. So we, after we started milling around a little bit, we decided to. Some of the guys started getting out the measuring tapes and measuring, and that's when it just kind of unfolded and we really started going forward.
But you really had to reconfigure almost every letter to make this work.
Correct.
How did you do that?
We took we acquired some bed sheets.
Lots of bed sheets.
120. And then there was an old what do you call it, a milk place? What do you call it?
A dairy.
A dairy over on Rose Avenue out in Venice that was abandoned, and it had a couple of big abandoned barns. And we got all the material, acquired or borrowed a sewing machine, and started painting some of the letters and dyeing some of them, and started putting them all together in this big barn.
And you came up here late at night with 120 sheets.
Yeah, New Year's Eve, and everybody. So the helicopters wouldn't get on us.
And it took you all night?
It took all night, yes.
And then the next morning, when the sun rose on the new day of the new year,
This is 1985, January 1st.
People looked out and saw what?
Instead of Hollywood, it said Raffi Sod.
And nobody knew what that meant.
Right, because the last 2 letters were going to be 4 exclamation marks. But it took so long to get all the letters done. It took all night to get it done that by the time we got to the last 2 letters, the sun was coming up. We figured the cops would show up and, we'd get in a lot of trouble. So we just left it as an odd word, and it worked pretty good.
Well, it was, good publicity. Did you stand down there and look up and feel proud of yourselves?
We felt like we had accomplished something. We were pretty beat. We'd worked all night to get it done. I felt, I'd invested in 2 mountain climbing straps, these harnesses.
To hang up there to do all of this.
Well, there was one letter, the Y, I believe, completely took a whole complete sheet, had to completely cover the letter. And as we were pulling it up, as it was coming morning, the wind started coming over the top of the mountain, and it filled this letter like a big giant spinnaker. And all of a sudden, me and the guy on the other end, Max, we were just holding on to this thing for dear life, and the guy that tied a slip knot. And sure enough, the darn thing slipped, and I flew back, and I had my little, I was telling some of my little World War II cap, lost that, and I there I was dangling. But so we had to climb back down, lower that letter, slit it with a knife, put a bunch of big cuts in it so the wind would pass through. Then we were able to pull it up and secure it.
Can your story possibly top that one? Now this is the Caltech story from what year?
This is from '87.
1987, and what was that all about?
Well, we were a bunch of freshmen, and Caltech had a big tradition of pranks, and we figured, well, we better get going if we were going to maintain our level of the pranks.
And you said, what better prank than the Hollywood sign?
It doesn't get much bigger.
So how did you put all this together? Who was in charge? How did you plan this out, plot this out?
Well, we had a few of us freshmen who went around and collected people, and we ended up with about 40 people from throughout the school.
Really? So you had a whole army?
Yeah, we had a team for every letter, and we put, black and white plastic, and we came up with the measurements and measured out everything. We grommeted it all together and tied ropes on so we could tie it all around the sides, and crawled up here late at night just like these guys, and got everything ready behind the sign so we wouldn't reveal ourselves until the last second possible. And then in about 30 minutes, we got everything rolled over the edge and tied down and scurried off the mountain.
See, Caltech was a little more...
Students.
Yeah, they had it a little more planned out.
They were college bound.
Than a band did.
We were rock and rollers and broke.
Absolutely. It's lucky you just were up to do this.
That's right.
But you did you feel good the next morning? You were down there, you were looking up, there was Caltech.
Yeah, so when we crawled down the mountain, we looked up and it said Caltech, but like these guys, we were tired, so we went to bed. But the best part was when the news reporters started showing up on campus, and we were all over the news that whole night. That was kind of
credit for you stepped forward and identified yourself?
No.
So really,
we did. We had already said it where if we got off the hill and got off intact, no one got hurt. There was a guy on the other end of a phone that I just had to drop a dime, and when he picked up the phone and found out that we accomplished it, he had a full list of all the news media of who to call.
So you were doing it to promote your band.
Yeah.
You were doing it to promote Caltech. And how does it feel coming back to the scene of the crime?
It's bigger than I remember. I remember it being big, but it's bigger than I remember, and I'm impressed that we did it. I wouldn't do it again.
You're not tempted to try this
again? I'm not
again?
20.
Mr. Peterson, come over here, because you know that over the years there have been a lot of different things done to this sign. What are some of the others?
Oh, certainly so. That's true. I was interested in listening to the stories here. But there's also one time was made when the Pope was over here, they made it Holywood.
Hollywood.
And when Oliver North was in trouble, they made it Hollywood.
Hollywood.
And let's see.
Wasn't there a Hollyweed?
When they were going to legalize marijuana in 1976, it was Hollyweed.
Well, this has been an honest-to-goodness Hollywood adventure. We've spent the whole day on, under, around, and through the Hollywood sign up here on the side of Mount Lee. Let's make sure that everybody understands this sign is located in Griffith Park. So it's a city park for the city of Los Angeles. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce owns the trademark of the Hollywood sign. So anytime you see a T-shirt or a photograph or whatever of the Hollywood sign, the Chamber of Commerce gets some royalties from that, and part of those royalties go to the trust, the Hollywood Sign Trust, for the
care and feeding of the Hollywood sign.
The care and feeding, taking care of this sign. There've only been two of them. The first one in 1923 when it said Hollywood Land. The second one built by this fellow right here in 1978. So there've only been two signs, but lots of colorful history here, including these two guys right back here who represent all of the mischief that's gone on up here. You're kind of representative of all of that. But it's really a very exciting and wonderful place. Everybody in the world knows about the Hollywood sign. And it is alive and well, even though it has
had ever so many facelifts in its lifetime.
Facelifts over the years, which again cuts right into the Hollywood story. Facelifts, the whole thing. It's all part of Hollywood. This wonderful sign, which has been here since 1923, is alive and well and still very much a part of California's goal. Well, here we are back at the good old Hollywood sign because there has been a last-minute, very interesting, very exciting development in our story about the history of this grand old sign. And here it is.
Up until now, the only visuals we had of that original Hollywoodland sign built back in 1923 were stills, were black and white still pictures, and they were fine, but let's face it, they're still pictures. Well, that's all changed now because of the research of one of our producers, Harry Palenberg, who came across some little-known, I think they're almost totally forgotten, films, old black and white movies made back in 1923 when the original Hollywoodland sign was being constructed. And here we go, look at this. This first shot shows a caterpillar. Looks like it's making one of the early roads for the Hollywoodland development. Now we've got a nice pan across the old Hollywoodland sign, and you can see very clearly that it's made out of, looks like almost sheet metal with holes in it to protect it against it blowing away. You can very clearly see the old telephone poles that were used as the bracing, what held up the letters. And in this shot, if you look down, you'll even see some of the workers at the bottom of the letters, and there's a horse tied up to one of the poles. This is my favorite shot right here. The workers climbing up the hill, carrying some of the construction materials with them as they were finishing up the sign. And we end up with this wonderful picture of one of the workers standing in the letter D, hamming it up for the cameras. These movies have been hidden away, forgotten, probably haven't been seen by anybody since those very early days when they were shot, back when the Hollywoodland sign was constructed. The original Hollywoodland sign built in 1923. But we found them, and we are delighted to be sharing them with you. These movies and the old sign itself, fine examples of California's gold. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Huell Howser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure as we traveled up to the world-famous Hollywood sign, which is definitely part of our state's history and an honest-to-goodness California icon. Now, if you'd like to go on this adventure again, share it with family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library. It's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.